Welcome to the Primitive Republic podcast, where we talk about the most primitive aspects of man to live off the land, hunt, and sustain oneself. At the core of our humanity, there are things that drive us. A sense to turn back the clock, to get away from modern life, and search for something primitive. Every week we talk to like-minded individuals that are looking to connect and create a community of people, a republic. Now your host, Aaron Schmaus.
Yeah, we can go ahead and get started. I've got a couple different things now that I realize who you are, that I would really like to talk to you about if you're interested. One of the things be, veteran issues and all that kind of stuff. That's one of the big things that's always on my mind. And of course, with everything that just happened recently. And then, coming out of cat season, stuff like that. Did you end up getting a cat?
No, I didn't. So we can't use dogs over here.
Oh man, that makes it tough.
Yeah, so it's tough. I tried really hard. But the limitations of, trying to walk one down or get lucky enough to call one in, it's just pretty difficult. There's a couple of guys that get it figured out, but I'm not amongst them. So my name is James Nash. I own Six Ranch Outfitters, and I live on the Six Ranch, which is my family's cattle ranch in Northeast Oregon. I was a Marine for 5 years. I went to college in Montana. I fought fire to pay my way through college, and I started guiding when I was 14 years old here in the Eagle Cap Wilderness. And when I got out of the Marines, I started guiding again, then started my own outfitting business, and I work with a couple different brands and take people hunting and fishing, and that's my story now.
Yeah. Well, thank you, by the way, for serving in the military. Appreciate that. And man, I know everybody says it, but it's almost, you can't say enough about it, I don't think. So thank you for that. But
thank you for saying so. You get a lot out of it. You give a lot, Terry, and you sacrifice a lot that are just things that you'll never have as a product of serving, but you get a lot back too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely do. You learn so much through being in the military. It changes. I mean, of course, with all the stuff, with PTSD and all that kind of stuff. Not everybody that goes into the military ends up with PTSD and all that kind of stuff, but the experiences and the changes that are made in such a good way, like responsibility and all that kind of stuff that the military teaches is just amazing. I find myself
I
in
agree.
a lot of ways. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's really valuable afterwards, and I think people get confused about benefits like the VA home loan and college tuition after you've served, things like that. This is an investment by the country in the country's future, because veterans have a lot to offer. It's not compensation. It's further investment, because we've given service members skills, not given it to them. We've beat it into them and made them earn it, but they have skills and assets that can now benefit the rest of the country in their capacity as veterans, civilians. Yeah.
Well, and one of the other things that a lot of people don't realize is that we actually do pay in part for our tuition with the GI Bill. They actually take a portion. Now, it's not nearly, full amount of the GI Bill, but in the first beginning portions of our enlistment, they take a portion out of our check for the GI Bill.
Yep. Yep.
So a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah. And why would they? That's an obscure piece of information. I remember when I was first wrapping up officer candidate school, got into the basic school. Somebody came into the auditorium and they're like, "All right, Marines, how many of y'all have student debt?" And most of the room raised their hand. I had worked my butt off fighting fire to pay for college. So I was barely making it from one year to the next, but I was making it and getting it done. I was working on cattle ranches in the wintertime. I was guiding a little bit on the side, but I made it. And I was really proud of myself. I came out of college without any debt, just by, consistently risking my life in various ways.
Yeah. Well, that in itself is incredible and a great lesson for people now, because it's like, how many, I mean, I don't know what the statistic is. So I'm really probably just talking out my butt, but I would probably say 90+% of the people who go to college end up with college debt. I mean, you think that's probably on par?
Well, I would think so, unless they're in a situation where their folks can pay for it or something like that. But, the reality for me is the school I went to was fairly affordable, Montana Western. I had some scholarships that helped out, and, I was able to cover the rest by working. And it just never even became a consideration to me that I might not work while I was in school. And fortunately, the format of that college allowed that. It was a great place for hunting. It was a great place for fishing. You only had class 3 hours a day, so you could work, you could recreate, kind of reinvigorate yourself, and then study really hard as well. So it was perfect for me.
That's awesome. That's really cool. That actually reminds me, I did an interview with Montevallo University down in Alabama. And they actually have it's like an outdoor college. They teach hunting skills and, videography and photography and, all that kind of stuff. Fishing, all that kind of stuff for people who want to be in the outdoors, and you get a 4-year degree. I wish I would have known about something like that when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So yeah, that's cool, man. So anyway, so you finished college and then went to the military, right?
Yeah, I started out with a flight contract. They were trying to stand up the F-35 at that time, so I went down to Pensacola and got through my flight physical and all that stuff, and took all the preliminary testing to make sure that I was both smart and dumb enough to be a pilot. And then I was waiting. This contract kept getting kicked farther down the road. They were having issues with the aircraft, so they didn't want to staff all these pilot positions and then not have aircraft for them to fly. And I ended up guiding whitewater for most of that summer. And then I got a call that was like, "Hey, they're pushing you out another 4 months." I was like, "Well, just so happens to be September, so I'm out of here." So I grabbed a little wall tent and I spent the next 3 months hunting, and then came out and turned my phone on, and they're like, "Yeah, it's going to be probably another 6 to 9 months." It's like, I can't keep doing this. So I switched to a ground contract, which meant, anything except aviation, and then went straight into officer candidate school that winter.
Wow.
And I ended up becoming a tank officer, despite some pretty steep odds, and then served as a tank platoon commander. And did one deployment to Afghanistan and got shot up a bit. Was awarded 2 Purple Hearts afterwards, and then was no longer able to do my job, so I was medically retired, and they sent me home.
Awesome. Well, not awesome that you got injured and everything, but I mean, just that you.
It's awesome that I survived. It's awesome that I got to serve with the guys that I did, and that I lived through some things that I had no reason to be able to live through. I mean, I got shot by a a thing called a recoilless rifle. It's an anti-tank rocket.
Oh yeah.
From a couple miles away. It was a beautiful shot. But there's no way I should have survived that. There's no way. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm pretty good at physics. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I did. And I'm stoked about it. So, it's just moving forward.
The fact that you're alive, I mean, that's something to be stoked about. I'm guessing you were down in Helmand.
I was. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a buddy that is getting ready to deploy. I don't want to say exactly when, obviously, but very shortly to that same region. Yeah. So it's going to be his first combat deployment. And he's going with a bunch of new guys. He's pretty rattled about it, but his guys he's done a good job training them, and so hopefully all that training gets put to good use. So
yeah, well, it is good training. The Taliban have learned how to fight this war the entire time that we've been there. The guys that have not been killed, they're really smart guys, they're really tough guys that are over there. But we've learned a lot too. So, I think we keep pushing each other and trying to change the game. So it's a tough spot, but it's still doable. I've got just a quick story about Helmand that I would love to throw out here.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking for a guy, and you never know who listens to a podcast, but I was flying back from Argentina a couple years ago, and it was like 54 hours of plane rides just to get home. It was brutal. And I landed in Boise. I parked my pickup at a hotel, and I was taking an Uber from the airport to the hotel. It's an 8-minute ride. And this guy pulls up, and his name's Mahmoud. I was wearing shorts, and I have a, Eagle Globe and anchor tattoo on my leg. And he said, hey, are you a Marine? I said, yeah. And he said, were you in Afghanistan? I said, yeah, I was. I said, are you from Afghanistan? He goes, yeah. I was like, oh man, this is kind of a little bit awkward, but 8 minutes, whatever, let's go. And jump in the car, and nobody's saying anything for a couple minutes. And then this guy goes, were you in Captian Ghazi in July of 2012? I was like, what? Like, yeah, you've got my, undivided attention at this point.
Yeah, no kidding.
I've gained 50 pounds. I've got facial hair now. Like, how in the world? But he goes, I was there too, and he was an interpreter with a Marine infantry unit that was just passing through. And for whatever reason, this dude remembered me. We did get in kind of a tight spot one time, but I'd completely forgotten him, and he sort of bailed us out of this tight spot that we were in. But he'd worked for a couple of years as a Terp. He'd gotten his green card, moved to Boise with his family. His kids were going to school. His wife was working. He was going to school at night and driving Uber during the day, and just aggressively pursuing the American dream. And we talked about what a shame it was that all these cops and fobs that we worked at were now under Taliban rule. And like, this guy was one of us. He was an Afghan, but he was totally one of us. And I was so taken back that, like, I didn't ask for his number or anything. I want to follow up with this guy and make sure he's successful.
I have
so if anybody knows
some friends,
a dude named Mahmoud.
Yeah, I've got some friends in Boise, actually, that they're in the military. They're in Boise. Maybe we could try and work something out, man.
Yeah, I mean, if we can find this guy, I'd love to see what I could do to ensure that he is successful here, because he's one of us.
Mahmoud?
Yep.
All right. So I'm writing down his name. Yeah, I'll definitely pass it on to the guys in Boise that I know and see if they can maybe work something out. And I'm sure they'd be more than happy to. They're, one of them's a backcountry rookie, and the other one is the founding member of Switching Camo, which is a company I'm on the board of directors for. So
gotcha. Yep.
yeah, so I'm sure they'd be happy to do that. So,
yeah, and you never know who listens to these things, right? It's amazing who pops up.
oh yeah, absolutely, man.
So
So you with your guiding service, you're constantly taking people out and different veterans and kids and all kinds of stuff like that, right? I think I had heard that
yeah,
on a
so
podcast or something.
so most of my model is like using the profits that I make from taking out, the average dude, and then turning those profits around and using it to be able to take out veterans and definitely support kids. I've got a week of fly fishing that is completely dedicated towards women. So we roll in all female guides, all female anglers, and it's the best week of fishing of the year as far as fishing conditions go. And yeah, just try and help everybody if I can.
That's great, man. It's a really cool thing.
Yeah, thank you.
So what sort of do you? So it's a little bit touchy, right? With the whole PTSD and all that kind of thing when it comes to veterans. And do you provide any sort of therapeutic uh, aspect to your guiding trips with them?
I feel like I do, but not maybe in the terms that you're talking about. So what I found is, I was diagnosed with PTSD as well, and I went through like a couple of years of different treatment plans, lots and lots of medication, and at the end of all that, it was just getting worse. And I distinctively remember talking with this psychologist who I'd worked with both in Afghanistan and back in the States. It's like, dude, I just need to be in a place where I have a shot at seeing an elk every day. And he's like, well, maybe that is what you need. And as it turns out, that's needed, open space and things to focus on. And I feel like fly fishing especially is helpful. And there's some mechanical aspects to that. Anything that is repetitious, even like doing dishes, can be very therapeutic for people because you're doing one thing, you're accomplishing it, and then moving on to the next. And you can really build a lot of confidence back in your life with something like that. But with fly fishing, it's so involved that there's no room for invasive thoughts. And you get this little sense of reprieve, and there's a chemical relief to that as well, because your body's not, dumping these,
high cortisol levels and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. All the shit that it dumps into your body whenever you're, having little panic attacks or whatever. And you can build off that. So I feel like, providing an outdoor experience does help in a really significant way. It certainly helped me. And I've seen it help other people. I don't have a full quorum of science to back it up. I have experience to back it up. And that's just what I try to provide for other people, because, the amount of drugs that the VA will throw at you will turn you into a zombie pretty quick.
Yeah, it's a vast amount.
And if you mix a little bit of booze and a toxic relationship with that, it can result in suicide before you know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of went down a similar road. And very similarly, the outdoors really helped me too. I wanted to go back to Montana, and I was stationed over Fort Bragg, Pope Air Force Base, and just stayed on the East Coast for a while, and decided to go back to Montana on a hunt. And it was just one of those hunts that was just a drag, like where you're just dragging yourself. And it's so weird when you're already in that mentality, everything is negative, it seems like. And so, as I'm like pushing myself up this hill, I'm not hearing anything, I'm not seeing anything, and just my negative mindset was just spinning. And then I got up to the top of this mountain and just like threw my pack down, turned around and sat down and just saw everything, and everything kind of became clear, and I just lost it. I completely boo-hooed. That's me being vulnerable on a mass media scale, but I mean, I was bawling, and I probably, it felt like an hour that I just sat there and just like cried and dealt with all of it. And after that, like the rest of that trip was just different for me. Being able to look out on the mountains and everything and just realize that I wasn't in the same place, even mentally. And so, yeah, the outdoors definitely did that for me too. So.
Yeah, I'm really glad you had that experience. That little bit of a reset, it changes everything.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And I think it's so important for everybody. I mean, you don't have to have PTSD to go out there and just reset. You could just be busy stay-at-home mom and just or whatever. Sometimes just everybody needs that step away from stress.
Yep, I agree. And then you can get a whole brand new kind of stress, which is the stress of a freaking bull that won't step out from behind a pine tree at 30
Yeah.
yards, or whatever. But it replaces the other stressors in your life. And the woods isn't just medicine. It is medicine, but it's not just medicine. It's good times, it's recreation, it's conservation, it's all these good things. But one of the real benefits is that it is a reprieve from the types of lives that a lot of people lead today, and those lives are very busy. They're very connected. You rarely get a break unless you're asleep, even if you're asleep, and your phone buzzes next to you and that snaps you out of it, and you got an email from Amazon wanting you to buy more stuff or whatever. We need to unplug from that once in a while. A lot of these trips that I guide, very, very remote places, there's no cell service. And a lot of times people are like, oh, my kid is going to freak out because he's not going to be able to have his iPad or his iPhone or whatever. It's like they don't miss it for a second.
Yeah.
Like these kids that haven't put down electronics for years, they don't miss it for a second. They're running around eating dirt and chasing rattlesnakes and doing stuff that their parents would normally be horrified of. But as soon as they get back into cell service days later, I watch people turn their phones on for the first time, and you can watch them literally in seconds. You can watch them physically age. They'll slump forward. Mm-hmm. These wrinkles form on their faces, and it's like this burden of zeros and ones is just collapsing them. And I'm guilty of it as much as anybody. And I know that it happens to me too. But I feel like it is important to recognize that and to take a break from it from time to time.
No, yeah, man, you're hitting on all of it, because I watch the same thing with my kids, and it's like, it's so easy to let the TV or let the iPad be the babysitter, when we're already really busy and stuff like that. And, it's hard, it really is hard. Everybody, this isn't coming from a place of judgment. We're all guilty of it,
Right.
But so that's really cool, man. I really appreciate what you're doing there. I'd like to push that more, and push your outfitting business more. get it out there and tell people about it and stuff.
Yeah. So I'm also in a weird place with that too, because my goal for the past few years is, to get on the other side of the trigger, to get to the point where I can make my living by being the guy who's actually hunting or the guy who's actually fishing. And I've made some steps forward with that, and it's getting better all the time. I hope that in the next few years I'll be able to transition out of guiding and into hunting. If I can do that, I am still going to be guiding veterans. I'm still going to be helping people out, but I just won't have to rely on it for money anymore.
Right.
So I'm booked deep into the future right now for hunting. So I just apologize to people who want to go hunting with me right now, because I do it until like 2025 at this point.
Holy cow, you are busy.
But I'm very, very, very fortunate. But for fishing, I can get people fishing, and that's something that they can probably take home and do for most of the year wherever they live. And that's something that I really work on. So I work on the kind of the educational aspect of it. If people just want to come and try and catch a couple fish, that's totally cool with me. But most of my clients come wanting to learn how to fish or to learn how to improve a specific skill or a type of cast or whatever. And those are the people that I enjoy the most, because I enjoy teaching.
That's cool. Have you done any like videos and stuff like that, like instructional videos or anything?
I haven't. It's probably something that I should look into. That would definitely increase the number of people that could benefit from it.
Well, and not only that, but you may end up with people who would be willing to pay for it, and that would help you step out into that arena that you're wanting to get to, where your hunting pays for itself. Your hunting and fishing and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's something I should explore. I do teach quite a few seminars on fishing and hunting and shooting, but that really only limits to the people who are able to attend the seminar. So a video is much more accessible to a larger group. I'll explore that. Thank you for the idea.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, you're in a really good area too, right? For salmon and what, kokanee is big in that area.
Yeah. The world record kokanee came out of the lake that I guide in for the kokanee portion of our fishing season. And that was a 1 year. We broke records just like day after day after day, and the fish have gotten smaller since then, but it's still a really beautiful place, and you can catch quite a few fish now, and occasionally some big ones. I think the biggest one we caught last year was 24 or 25 inches, and that world record fish was right around 29 inches.
Wow. That's awesome. And you fly fish for them, or is it spinnerbait?
No. So that's trolling. And I can talk about kokanee fishing until, the next ice age, but, have you ever fished, deep sea, open ocean stuff, like trolling for marlin or sailfish?
I never have, but I've trolled, the lakes and stuff here for, lake trout and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's comparable,
but a little bit. When you're trolling in open ocean, you use these big poles that go out to either side of the boat, and then that will spread out baits behind the boat that kind of run in a V. So you'll have, some that are close to the boat that are in the center, and then the farther out away from the center line of the boat, the farther back the baits go, so that you're kind of keeping them in the wake, and they'll be right on the surface. So they're spread out laterally. And I did a bunch of tournament fishing with this stuff back in North Carolina when I was convalescing. And I basically took that same method and I shrunk it, and then I made it vertical for kokanee. So now I run I run something real similar to what you would run for a sailfish or a marlin, except instead of it being 12 inches long, now we're dropping it down to 3/4 of an inch long. And instead of it spreading out laterally, I'm spreading it out vertically. So I'll have 6 different depth presentations, trying to find the portion of the water column that's the correct temperature, where fish are feeding actively. And then once I can start identifying that gaps between all these depths, so that I'm running these 6 baits pretty close to that same area, and we use downriggers to accomplish that. But it's fun. It's really technical. It's really quiet and relaxing. You know, yeah, you've just got a little electric motor out there and going 1.1 to 1.3 miles an hour and waiting for a fish.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds really technical in a lot of ways, but it's really, well, I mean, everything can be technical if you geek out on it, but.
Yep. And if you're a geek, you can't help it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's my excuse.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, man. I like that kind of stuff. That's right up my alley. I get all into that kind of thing.
Yeah, come check it out sometime. You'll like it.
Oh, I absolutely will. Well, salmon fishing is one of the things that, you know, I've caught a couple salmon, but I've never actually fished for salmon. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, so that's definitely on my list. So you had you're a pretty big predator management guy, right? Very big into predator.
I am. Very much so, and we're coming up on a real important time of year for, especially for coyote management, and then getting into bears here pretty quick as well.
Yeah, spring bears coming up. I'm so excited for that.
Do you have a tag?
A spring bear tag?
Yep.
I will for Montana and Idaho.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but yeah, so me and another former Marine buddy of mine, Justin Metcalf from Kong Valley Collective, we're going to be hunting in Idaho for spring bear. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah, really excited about that.
Yeah.
But, so
yeah,
what is
John's a good guy. You'll like hunting with him.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I've never actually met him in person. We met through another buddy of mine that's in the Professional Outdoor Media Association, but we've had a lot of really long talks and stuff like that, and we text back and forth and all that kind of stuff. That's a good thing about the internet and all that. But
you bet.
Yeah. So why did you say that it's a really important time for coyotes?
Coyotes are breeding right now. So if you're looking at reducing your coyote population, now's the time of year where the breeding animals, the mature animals that are going to be producing pups, are pretty aggressive. So you can actually, target some of these mature animals, and then have a larger impact on reducing that population just by preventing them from actually breeding. We're towards the back end of the coyote rut right now. But the other reason that it's important is because as they come out of the breeding season and have these pups, their energy stores are really depleted, and that coincides with fawns and elk calves hitting the ground.
Oh yeah.
So the absolute bottom line for ungulate populations is survival of the period. What we're looking at in this area, all over the Intermountain West for mule deer are declining. They've been in decline since 1959, but what we're seeing in places like Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, Oregon is really steep decline. So in my area of Northeast Oregon, which is kind of always been the center of mule deer, especially high country, steep angle mule deer, and Rocky Mountain elk for our state, We've lost 50% of our deer in the last 5 years. And that was already low. So I'll give you an example of the largest unit in my county. It's called Sled Springs. They put out 1,925 tags a year for bucks. There's both mule deer and white-tailed deer in it. They've been putting out 1,925 tags for 20 years. It's just the number. The management objective level for that unit is 11,000 deer. The current population estimate is 2,600 deer. And of those 2,600, they think only 260 of them are bucks.
Wow.
So we're putting out 1,925 tags for 260 bucks. And it's just mind-blowing to me that that's what we're doing as, you know, from the state wildlife management perspective. It's crazy. It's not sustainable. But we literally have half the deer in that unit now that we did 5 years ago. And if that decline continues, it doesn't last very long.
Well, it sounds like it's going to continue just because of the number of people that are going to be chasing those bucks.
Yeah, the number of hunters is a significant factor on the bucks. Right now, I don't think those 260 bucks can actually cover the rest of the does to increase that population. But of the ones who do, we really need their fawns to survive.
Yeah.
And the main thing that is going to kill a fawn is a coyote or a lion or a black bear or a bobcat.
Yeah.
And of those, coyotes are the hardest on fawns. You know, a lion can kill them anytime, and bears will work on them a little bit. You know, a bear might kill 30 or 40 deer a year, or elk calves. But, you know, a lion is going to be killing one every week. So that's 52 a year. And then those coyotes, if they turn into specialty acts on these fawns, they can go through a lot of them, and there's not very much meat on a fawn, so it doesn't satiate them long. You know, they're moving on to the next really quickly. Yeah. So that's why I say this is an important time of year to be killing predators.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, what's your perspective on the wolf debate going on in like Washington? Have you guys seen any issues with that?
So, yeah, about 90% of the wolves that live in Oregon live in Wallowa County, where I live. We've had wolves here since 2007. That was the first time that my family actually experienced livestock loss from wolves. We didn't recognize it at that time. It was like, what in the world just happened to this calf? You know, we've never seen a calf get destroyed like that before, and it was happening at that time really close to town. And since then, you know, we've lost around 100 head of cattle. And I used to know the numbers for the total losses for Wallowa County, but I think last year I figured out that since 2010, we lost enough cattle in Wallowa County to wolves to feed 40,000 Americans for a year.
Holy cow. Yeah, so you guys are getting hit pretty hard. And just to think the wildlife population too. I mean, because they're not going to strictly stay to beef.
Of course. Yeah, the beef is the smallest portion of what they're actually eating. So the state just did their wildlife surveys in the Hells Canyon area, which is been dominated by wolves pretty heavily for a while now. There's 3 or 4 different packs that use that area. Some that transition back and forth between Idaho and Oregon and every year. But basically they couldn't find elk in places where they historically had found them every single year, which is these big benches on the edges of the canyon. Mm-hmm. And this year the elk were all hiding in really craggy, rocky stuff, which is the same thing they did in the Frank Church wilderness when the wolves started to hit them really hard there. And the other thing that they saw was that while the overall population remained similar to what it did last year, calf recruitment was close to nothing this year.
Wow.
So, which is the same thing that we saw in the big elk herds, like the Selway herd and the North Yellowstone herd. Those herds remained constant for a while, even after they started getting big pressure from wolves and grizzlies. But if you give it one lifespan cycle of an adult elk, so 7 to 10 years, call it 7, that's when, if you don't have calf recruitment for that entire time, you see the entire herd collapse. So
Yep.
North Yellowstone herd went from around 30,000 to 3,000.
Yep.
Selway herd is basically extinct now.
Yeah, it's down to hundreds. I was talking to Rocky Jacobson just the other day, a couple weeks ago, and he was saying that their herd used to be at like 17,000, and now it's down to like 700.
Yep. So that's what we'll see here as well. And it's not just in Hell's Canyon. It's everywhere that these wolves are established, which is all of northeastern Oregon. And so these places that these really premium hunts that took 20, 25 years to draw a tag, it's close to over. It's not completely over, but the times of being able to draw that tag and expect, have a reasonable expectation of finding that bull that was 370, maybe 400. It's not completely over, but it's close to over. These herds are going to go away, and
Yeah.
it's a real shame.
Yeah. So I had one of the other things I'd like to get your opinion on this. One of the other things that I had mentioned to Rocky, and it's something that I'm starting to adamantly think is more and more true, is so I think hunting is going to pretty much diminish. And the reason I say it like that is because of the way that we manage our predators. We let hearts and minds and stuff like that manage our predators. We'll basically, or not manage them, depending on how you want to say it. And if you increase the number of predators to the point where you're decreasing the number of ungulates that you have in an area, eventually that gives all those anti-hunters and stuff like that a leg to stand on by saying, well, you guys can't hunt in this area because there's just not enough animals for you guys to hunt. And
Yep.
I mean, and we're seeing it all over the place. It's sad. It's really sad that, they choose one animal over another rather than a total management, procedure.
Well, the misunderstanding about predator management plans is that, for the most part, they don't actually manage predators. What predator management plans is people. So, like, take lions in Oregon, for example. Oregon has published the same lion population estimate for the last several years with no 6,000. Can you imagine anything harder than counting all of the lions in Oregon when you can't even find them?
Yeah, no kidding.
Right? So what they do is they take scat dogs that are trained to find lion poop into areas, and then they go out and they do a grid search and they find some lion poop and they collect it and then take DNA samples to see how many different lions that came from. And then they say, okay, this is our population density in this habitat type. And then they look at the entire state and draw some big circles and be like, okay, this is the amount of this habitat we have. Extrapolate. That's how many lions we have. Like, holy crap. That is some shaky science.
Yeah, I was going to say, I suppose that's a method, but it's, oh man, that's drawing some really vast conclusions, though.
Yeah. So Oregon Public Broadcasting just published an article about how hunting was an ineffective means of controlling lions and that it might make lions worse, which is really, really crazy to say. But it's definitely a push to try and ban lion hunting like it has been in a couple other states. But what people don't understand about that, and I don't really imagine that if somebody would be on the fence on this issue, that they would have made it this far into our podcast. But when California banned lion hunting, it actually increased the number of mountain lions that were being killed in California. The change was instead of the lions being killed by hunters who were paying the state for the privilege to do so, now the state was paying animal damage control agents to go out and do it.
Yeah. And I mean, they have to, because now they're a danger to people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. People think that, oh, we'll just ban hunting and then these animals won't get killed anymore. And the exact opposite occurs.
That's why, so the second part of what I was saying before is that I personally don't believe that we should manage predators based on, you know, human intervention. I think that we should solely base it on the ecological and biological availability of the area. And the reason I say that is because we're making a push as people into all of these different habitat areas. And so you've got to, if you're going to manage your predators based on human intervention or human conflict, then you have to diminish the number of predators, right? So, and by doing that, either a state agency or hunters are having to kill these animals, right? So, if you take the human conflict aspect out of it, it creates a need for hunting rather than a need for the state. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
And at that point, it doesn't matter if Fluffy gets zapped by a cat. You know, it's, hey, you know, you share the same woods as that lion, so deal with it. You know what I mean?
And I hear that all the time. People say, well, you know, you're in wolf country. Like, what are you talking about? Wolves have only been back here for a few years. That's like saying that I'm in tourist country. That, you know, it's crazy. Like this was not wolf country. It's just country, and we have to share it, and we have to figure out how to work together with all of it. Something interesting is happening with this in Japan, where there's intense urbanization, especially with youth and middle-aged folks. They're all moving out of rural places and into town. And what that has done is it's left older generations in these rural places. And Japan has a handful of bear species. And these bears have blown up their populations and have moved out of the wilderness, out of the woodsy areas, and into these now largely vacant rural areas. And Japan is having hundreds of bear attacks every year. Wow. Montana had 11 last year, and people are losing their minds. Japan is having hundreds of people attacked by bears a year. And while we talk about people moving into rural places and taking up areas of habitat for wildlife, we may be looking at a time in the near future where the opposite is, and by establishing large predator populations now, we're sort of pre-treating these areas for a tragedy like Japan to occur here in the U.S.
That's a very good point. I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, that's a very, very good point. Yeah, what you said, we had 11 attacks last year here. I remember a few of them.
That's the number that I've heard enough times. But and that's enough, right? That's scary as hell to me. I hate grizzlies.
Oh,
they just scare the heck out of me.
They're monsters, man. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think they're beautiful, and I want to see them, but not when I'm out hunting. I mean,
yeah,
they're, man. I actually, I had just seen, and I'm trying to track down the validity of this story, but I think it was on Facebook or something like that, that there was a huge boar grizz in Shoto, apparently, that came out of some hay bales. They said it was recently, but apparently it came out of some hay bales at a rancher. And I mean, I'll send you this picture. It is a huge boar. And I mean, if you've got like monsters like this running around in the woods, I mean, you have like almost no chance of survival. But I'm trying to track down the validity of this and if it actually was something that had just happened or, whatever. There's snow and stuff everywhere, but
yeah, that's a big bear. He was probably hibernating in there.
Right. I mean, look at him compared to that round bale. I mean,
yeah,
guy's just a monster.
That's a tanker of a bear. Shoto's such a wild place too. I love it up there.
Yeah, it is. Right there out on the plains where all the grizzlies used to roam and stuff like that, I guess.
Well, and it's right there next to Glacier, and that China Wall area. I think is one of the most predator dense areas in the lower 48.
Wow, I would believe it, but
yeah,
Glacier's a wild place anyway. But I've got a couple buddies that are up there, and they hunt all around the around the Columbia Falls, Whitefish, Flathead area and stuff like that, and they're like, man, there's getting to be a lot of grizzlies around here. It's starting to get really, really rough. And
yeah,
I'm just surprised there hasn't been as many attacks up there as there has.
I worked on some of the DNA collection stuff in college in the Mission Mountains. So we're just wrapping barbed wire around trees at bait sites and pulling hair samples off that to try and develop DNA profiles and see what kind of genetic diversity was going on with those bears down there on the edge of the res. But yeah, it's interesting. I go back to the Latin for the grizzly, which is Ursus horribilis, and Lewis and Clark.
Yeah.
Lewis and Clark wrote that. It's like these guys weren't really dramatic guys, they're really a lot of what they wrote and a lot of what they named was very plain spoken. And then they're like, this bear is horrible. What's horrible in Latin? I don't know. Let's just call it horribilis.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had 3 friends now, 3 people that I personally know that have been attacked by bears, by grizzlies.
Yeah.
And, sure. I mean, it's just, it's going to be a more common occurrence if we don't manage these things. It's getting rough. Like I hunt down in, the GYE and stuff like that, which for people who don't realize, that does not mean that I hunt in Yellowstone. The greater Yellowstone ecosystem is huge, and it encompasses a lot more than Yellowstone. But I hunt down in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And I'm telling you, it's getting thick with bears down there. And
I know.
They're not.
And you're being
nice.
Bad neighbors because your bears and your wolves are leaking out into other states.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, thanks, Montana. Really appreciate you. Oh, some chronic wasting disease, yeah, thanks for that too. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can go back to Colorado and Wyoming and stuff like that with the CWD aspect of things, but
maybe, but it's in all four corners of Montana, and Montana hasn't been testing for it. There's only one lab in the state that can even test for CWD. So now that they're testing for it, they're finding it everywhere that they're looking.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense. That's a whole nother topic in itself too. That's, I don't know. I wonder about it though.
Yeah.
But
I'm really, really concerned about CWD and the way that it's transmitted, as a prion that can't be killed. Like you can't bleach it, you can't cook it with ultraviolet rays. And Oregon has said, look, you can't bring in a skull or a spinal column into Oregon anymore. And unless it is taxidermy finished.
Right.
But when you test with that lab in Bozeman, they are pulling lymph nodes, and they're actually pulling lymph nodes instead of brain tissue to test, which tells me that it's in the lymphatic system. If it's in the lymphatic system and it's in the nervous system, and we know that it can also be transmitted through urine and saliva, which means it's in the digestive system, then it's probably in the muscular and skeletal system as well. So what can we actually bring from Montana to another state that isn't possibly transmitting CWD?
That's true. I mean, I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, that's absolutely true.
So until we get some clarification on this, I'm not going to be bringing more meat back from Montana.
Well, and so that's the thing, though. It's not just Montana, though. I mean, you've got it in all over Wyoming, all over Colorado, all over Idaho, and it's all over the place.
And I'm sure that when we start testing, we're going to find it here as well.
Oh, probably. I wouldn't be surprised. So that's the other thing too. You were alluding to, you can't really treat it with ultraviolet, and if it is in the muscular tissue, then that means that we're excreting it as waste, right?
Yep.
Which bleeds through the ground and all that kind of stuff through our septic systems and all that kind of stuff. So does that mean also that we are spreading it?
100%. And it's in the ground forever. Does not go away.
Yeah, that's a really scary thought.
So, and then, does this transfer into our livestock? If this hits some of these hog barns and chicken farms where these animals are really condensed, we could lose a lot. We could lose a lot.
Mad cow disease was already a prion, wasn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, well, Captain Nash, thank you very much. I think we should probably wrap it up. I think we're right at about an hour or so. I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. And
absolutely,
I am going to pass on that name for you, Mahmoud, and see if we can hook you guys up.
Yeah, let's see if we can find this guy. See what we can do for him. He served as much or more than the American troops did, and he's trying to do it right. So if anybody runs across this dude in Boise, let's get his number and make sure he's doing good.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Primitive Republic Podcast, an Aaron Schmaus media production. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Primitive Republic. You can also find us on our website at www.archeryoutdoorsman.com.